Hello, you're with IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live conversation web TV portal. Well, US President Barack Obama has invited Narendra Modi to visit the United States at a time of his convenience to strengthen bilateral relations. He has, of course, congratulated him on this huge victory. Does that mean that the 9-year ban is reversed? And what does it mean for Indo-US bilateral relations? This conversation is going to focus on that. And joining me in the studio, I have Mr. K.P. Fabian, former ambassador, Indian ambassador. Mr. Fabian, thank you so much, Ambassador Fabian, for joining us. And I also have Pramit Pal Chaudhary, who is foreign editor, Hindustan Times. Thank you so much for joining us, Pramit. And also joining us on Skype, I have Shobhan Saxena. Shobhan Saxena is a journalist and academician. He writes for various publications and currently he's joining us from Sao Paulo in Brazil. Shobhan, thank you so much for joining this conversation. Okay, let me first ask you, Ambassador Fabian, the fact that the President of the US has, congratulated Mr. Modi and invited him. What does it mean? Does it show a softening of the US stand? Because the US was very categorical in its views towards religious intolerance.
Let me put it this way. This is perfect, normal diplomatic behavior to have congratulated the winner of the election. And as you said, what a huge victory.
Yes.
And to have invited the shortly to be Prime Minister of India to visit the United States. Now, I don't see it as anything different. Now, as regards the visa matter, I suppose there was no question of any visa denial to the Prime Minister of India.
Okay.
That was never thought of. After all, diplomacy means you deal with the powers that be. And in the case of a democratically elected leader, well, all the more reason. I mean, this visa matter is, from the White House point of view, it's not an important matter.
Pramit, what is your take on that? Is it a reversal of the 9-year ban? What is it really?
It's a de facto reversal of the 9-year ban. The ban continues to exist. If tomorrow, if 2 days after the oath of office, Mr. Modi loses the prime ministership for some strange reason, the ban still exists. As a private individual, he can still not be guaranteed, at least, of getting a visa.
All right.
And the long-term visa that he used to have is still has not been given back to him. I would differ with Ambassador Fabian on one point. I think that Obama's decision to phone Modi even before he'd taken the oath of office was actually a surprise in my view. Only, I think, 7 other governments actually called him on the day of the election. All of the others basically sent messages of congratulation, but generally the view of a lot of the governments a lot of the embassies I spoke with said that the normal view is that you don't phone until after the oath of office is taken, and in some countries they insist that the election commissioner has to notify the election results.
Right.
So Obama making the phone call, I think, was an attempt to indicate that he wanted the visa issue to be considered as yesterday's concern.
Right.
But legally, the visa ban has not been lifted yet.
The visa ban on the individual man, Mr. Narendra Modi, has not been lifted.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a Twitter message from the Secretary of State, John Kerry, who says, congratulations to @Narendra Modi and BJP. Look forward to working with you for growing shared prosperity and security with the world's largest democracy. Again, social media, a one-to-one, interaction. And we were just talking some time ago about the power of social media and how that has also helped Mr. Modi. And again, on Twitter, John Kerry there, as you can see, sending a message of congratulations to Narendra Modi. All right, let me go across to Shobhan Saxena, who is talking to us from Brazil. What is your reaction? As Pramit said, it was a surprise that on the day of the results, and before he had even taken oath, the President of the United States called Narendra Modi to congratulate him. What is your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised at all, because the Americans have been trying to reach out to Narendra Modi for quite some time.
Right.
They have sent delegations, and I think the the resignation of the American ambassador to India, Nancy Powell, had also something to do with her relationship with the Gujarat chief minister.
Yes.
They have been sending business delegations, they've been trying to reach out, they have been kind of very positive messages coming from Washington. They have been looking forward to working with Modi as it became clear that he was a front runner in this election. But I mean, now he's the elected Prime Minister of India, and I think the Americans don't have any other option but to work with him. But I'll point it out that in the past, they have harassed other world leaders, and I can recall the incident of Iranian President Ahmadinejad. They almost denied visa to him when he wanted to visit United Nations. So just the fact that he's the elected leader of the world's biggest democracy doesn't give him the right to visa or the right to travel to the United States. But US has a long history of working with all kind of autocratic leaders and dictators. So I'm sure they're willing to work with Narendra Modi as well.
All right. How would you react to that, Ambassador Fabian? Because I'm sure you also agree that, you know, the India is strategically very important to the United States.
Well, India is important to the United States in many ways, not only strategically, but in many other ways. And I had said earlier that it is normal diplomatic practice. In the light of what has been said, I will correct it. It is smart diplomacy on the part of Obama, which I expected.
Right. You know, this Indo-US bilateral ties, you know, as Shobhan also pointed out, has reached a low after the Devyani Khobragade case. How do you see, that is obviously the biggest challenge that Mr. Modi is facing, besides this whole shadow that lurks, you know, behind him. How do you think he's going to handle that?
Khobragade or the relationship?
The relationship.
Well, the relationship actually fell well before Khobragade. Khobragade is a symptom of the relationship. The relationship actually fell apart after the passage of the Nuclear Liability Bill in India. At that point is when Obama concluded that Manmohan Singh was unable to fulfill any of even the private promises that Manmohan Singh had been making to Obama. And that while Obama liked Manmohan Singh personally, I've met many of Obama's aides, and they've said that he actually has a personal liking for the man. The sense was that Manmohan Singh was simply unable to fulfill anything. George Bush was a person who didn't seem to mind whether India came forward on part of the relationship. But Obama is much more transactional. And after that, he basically ceased to take India very seriously. And at that point, the relationship starts to disintegrate across the board. We stopped talking about Afghanistan, which was the single biggest strategic issue we had.
Yes.
We stopped converging on a lot of points, particularly in East Asia, which was the other big strategic problem, the relationship about China. The economic relationship began to fall apart on a whole host of fronts. You can see that if you look at the battles on the WTO front and the IPR, the US-India Business Council lost its leader, president, recently because of an internal battle within the US corporate world about whether to pursue the relationship with India. On a whole host of fronts, the relationship completely died out. Khobragade was just a symptom. Khobragade was an example of a type of crisis that diplomats are trained, in fact, to preempt before it happens. And there have been previous cases when MAID visas had been up and become a problem. And in every single case, the two governments had basically ensured that it hadn't become a crisis on the relationship. In this case, they had just stopped talking to each other.
Right.
So restoring that relationship is not going to be easy, in my view. On the economic side, there's a lot of things that will have to be slowly repaired bit by bit. Retroactive taxes.
Let me just you know, interrupt you there. I'm sorry. I just want to get Shobhan on that. You know, there was a lot of campaigning happening against Narendra Modi post 2002, but that you know, seems to be dwindling. You know, people against him in the United States have dwindled. So it's almost like, you know, the way is being cleared for him. What is your reaction to that? I mean, you had Biju Mathew, you know, Professor Biju Mathew, who was vehemently, you know, he was a convener of the Coalition Against Genocide, which was dedicated to fighting for minority rights. You had so many senators who said that no, this man cannot be allowed. But now somehow that base is becoming thinner.
I don't agree with that, but I think the irony here is that the visa ban on Narendra Modi came during the regime of George W. Bush. I
Right.
mean, who was not really known for his human rights record. I mean, he's violated, human rights of people across the world, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Pakistan. I mean, he started this program of attacks, attacking other countries, invading other countries.
Right.
But I think in the past few years, the Narendra Modi lobby, which is a very, very strong lobby in the United States, the NRIs, the Gujarati community, they've been trying to invite him to US. I can recall that there was one such seminar at the Wharton University. He was supposed to go there or address by video, but he couldn't do it. So I think he has a lot of support among the NRIs in India, but also there are people who oppose his politics, his kind of politics.
But also, let me just tell you, in the UPA 2 regime, a lot of NRIs who were supportive of the economic policies of the UPA, they also became very disillusioned because of the fact that the UPA 2 was too busy concentrating on scams, and they were not really taking very strong economic decisions at a policy level. So they kind of, changed sides. That has also happened. The NRI community in the United States has also changed sides for that reason.
Yeah, I think you have to understand the basic nature of India-US relations. I mean, it's touted as we are touted as kind of natural allies, or the alliance of the two biggest democracies in the world. But the basic nature of the relationship is that the US wants see India as a big market,
Yes.
as a source of cheap services, and as a bulwark against China. As long as we are fulfilling these roles, they like us. And the moment you don't do that, and all the disputes about pharmaceuticals and intellectual property rights and H-1B services, it is because of that,
Right.
So if India is not doing American bidding or against China or on all these issues, then Manmohan Singh becomes an underachiever on the cover of Time magazine. That's what exactly happened. And as Pramit mentioned, the Kobargade episode, it was also a result of that, basically. So if the NRI community turns against UPA 2, they're basically Americans, they live in America, they pay the taxes in America, and they agree with American policies. It's all because of that, this change in the relationship.
That's a very interesting point. Ambassador Fabian, let me ask you, do you think India now needs an assertive, decisive leader to take so many issues forward, as far as Indo-US relations are concerned?
Let me put it this way. In my view, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has not been sufficiently assertive.
Okay.
What is required is to be assertive and not aggressive. In any case, there's no question of being aggressive towards the United States. But even towards the United States, it is possible to be assertive, to be clear in one's head, and to articulate one's position clearly, and not to project the impression that one is vulnerable to pressure. That is not good diplomacy. And I think it would have been possible for Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to have delivered much more in the matter of US relations than he had. Of course, as regards, big contracts for the American companies in the nuclear field, I think there was a real problem. And I would not exactly blame Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. There's a question of liability. And if American companies want to sort of do business without incurring any liability, well, I think it will be very difficult for us to agree to it.
To continue with what you were saying, Pramit, US requires India's consensus on various issues, right? The Iran, Afghanistan, there are so many strategic issues on which the US wants to partner with India. How do you see Narendra Modi really tackling these issues?
I don't think Modi is actually interested in a lot of these issues. His view has been, from when I've talked to people close to him who do advise him on foreign policy, he's very much focused on the economy. He sees his entire real concern for the next at least 2 or 3 years to be largely about restoring an Indian economy that is in very poor shape. And he doesn't really see any reason for India to play a major role on the world stage, except in those areas where he sees it as converging with his own economic reform policies. So his relationship actually with the United States will be an economic relationship, but the strategic relationship, which I would argue has been in very poor shape now for the past 4 or 5 years, probably will not be restored. And I think I should add that Obama himself is now heading to be a lame duck. If the Republicans capture the Senate in this November, in the midterm elections, Obama will be virtually unable to pass any legislation or do anything for the last 2 years of his term. He's already struggling. When you go to Washington, I was in Washington last month, and the sense was that as a president, he'd already basically run his course. So you have one president who's not really interested in anything other than the domestic economy, and you have another president, prime minister, and you have a president who is essentially at the end of his term.
So basically fresh beginnings have to be made is what you're saying? Is that what you're saying? Shobhan just raised a very interesting point on the pharmaceutical companies. What is your take on the US trade protection?
Specifically on this or on the other issues? There are several trade issues.
Yeah, the overall picture.
Well, there's a number of different issues all countries fight with each other on trade issues. I mean, if you look at the list of WTO cases and fights and battles, India has huge anti-dumping cases, for example, with China, which I think remains our single largest source of trade friction. But the specific one that has caused the worst amount of blood is on the issue of intellectual property rights.
Yes.
And it's driven in the United States really by only one company, Pfizer. The part of the problem, though, again, is the fact that in India we now have 2 or 3 different drug policies being run by different branches of the government. And because our Prime Minister's office had become so defunct over the past year, there had been no attempt to rationalize this. Because it was not just the US companies that were complaining, it was Indian companies domestically were complaining. I used to meet people from Cipla and so on would come to our newspaper office and say, for heaven's sakes, tell us what is the IPR policy of our government. We don't understand it anymore because we get different. So that was part of the problem. I don't think IPR is going to be a major concern. It's only one company really that's driving it. It's large, but again, it comes to this. If you don't have a larger geopolitical relationship that's functioning, then all the little stuff starts to enter the relationship, which used to be the case in the past in the Indo-US relationship. I think it's come back. I would argue the real problem now, for example, in China, is that India is taking a hard line on China and America is not. We are now becoming more and more suspicious of whether the US wants to form a relationship with the Chinese. So you can see Japan, for example, is a country that's moving closer to us because it shares exactly that same concern. And Afghanistan, we no longer just basically talk. India wanted America to stay. Then they wanted America to get out as fast as possible. Now that the Americans have left, we don't really, or are about to leave, we really don't care what they do because they don't really matter as far as we're concerned.
Shobhan, let me just talk to you about, do you agree with Ambassador Fabian and Pramit that, at various levels, this ought to be the start of a new relationship, be it a Prime Minister who's interested in only the economics, getting the economy of the country back on track, and a President who is virtually, probably towards the end of his term?
I think it depends on what is the basis of the relationship. What is the foundation? Relationship between 2 big countries like India and US cannot be just economic relationship. It has to be much more than that. And I would like to point out here that a lot has been said about Manmohan Singh not being an assertive leader, but I think he's played a very important role in international affairs, especially in forums like BRICS and IPSA. And it's because of India's involvement in projects like BRICS that India-US relations have taken a hit, because India has been demanding more role for BRICS countries in institutions like IMF and World Bank. India has been working with Russia, China, Brazil, and South Africa for creating a BRICS development bank which can challenge the monopoly of IMF and World Bank. India has been demanding an alternative global financial system. And I think this has played a very important role in worsening of India-US relations. Because
do you think that will be overturned now? Do you think all these things will be overturned now?
I have a suspicion, maybe yes, because the US has been trying to take 2 countries away from BRICS. One is Brazil, and second is India. Brazil is very, very committed to BRICS. They want to go away from it. And all the NSA revelations that the President Dilma Rousseff was being spying by the NSA has made the relationship worse. So Brazil is very committed to BRICS. The country the US can take away from BRICS is India. And
Okay.
without India, there's no BRICS, you know.
Okay, let me just put that question to Ambassador Fabian. What is your view on that?
Well, I don't know whether the United States is trying to take India away from BRICS, but I doubt whether India is going to walk out of BRICS. I don't think there is any question. And even the United States, I doubt whether that is on their serious agenda. Of course, the United States wouldn't like any sort of effort on the part of others to sort of influence its decision making. United States wants to influence the decision making of others. It does not want anything in the reverse direction. But that apart, I think BRICS, they are going to be there. India is going to continue to play an important role. And I don't think our role in the BRICS is a matter of serious sort of conflict of interest between us and the United States.
When do you think the United States actually started taking Narendra Modi seriously? Because, you know, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, they were the ones who
Yes.
actually told, said that, for all the... whatever has happened in 2002, he cannot be allowed to enter the country.
Yeah.
And now the US is really wooing Mr. Modi. When do you think that change happened?
Well,
Was it only in the last few months, or has it been...
No, I think the State Department had been pushing for a reversal of the ban. So the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom is a U.S. Congress body.
Yes.
It's not run by the U.S. federal government. And there's a Department for International Religious Freedom which is separate, which is within the State Department.
Okay.
Now, the one inside the State Department had not recommended the visa ban. They had said, it's a ridiculous thing, don't waste your time
Even
doing
Fareed Zakaria had written in the Washington Post that why is he being singled out?
Yeah.
There are
And-
countries,
Right.
like Saudi Arabia and
And
Pakistan.
the U.S. Congress body had decided to go off and do this on more or less on its own. And the question to some people when you talk to Washington is why was the body allowed to go ahead? Somebody should have stopped it at the beginning
Right.
and blocked it. The White House or somebody should have snipped it off at the beginning. But once it got through, once the visa ban is introduced, and then the Europeans had also by that time also joined the ban, it then became very difficult to reverse it. The real issue was that at the moment when last year, now under U.S. regulations, the instant the Modi had became a prime ministerial candidate, they could no longer change the visa ban. So the game was to get it done before September, before he became. And I remember there was a delegation from the State Department who I met last summer, who said we're struggling right now and we're recommending desperately that this is the time to do it before he becomes a prime ministerial candidate. But for whatever reason, and I have a suspicion it has to do with the fact that by then Obama was paying absolutely no attention to the India file, as they say, and there was nobody in the White House who was looking at India at all, just ignored the State Department's recommendation. So then September hits, and then by then, it's the visa ban is effectively impossible to reverse
Right.
under U.S. regulations. And I think an additional factor was the fact that we didn't have, in my view, particularly able ambassadors in either company. They didn't have a good one there, we didn't have a good one there at the time this was happening. And as a consequence, a certain degree of proactive diplomacy at that point possibly could have pushed it through, but it didn't happen.
All right. Shobhan, it is said that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. So, do you think that now the shadow, on Mr. Modi is dissipating, and that he will be capable of taking assertive decisions as far as India is concerned? Your final comments. We have to wrap up the conversation now. The conversation will, of course, continue on this website. But your final comments.
Interestingly, I was talking about BRICS, and Mr. Modi's first foreign visit would be to Brazil.
Great.
In July,
okay.
to take part in BRICS Fifth Summit, which is happening in Fortaleza in July, just immediately after the World Cup final.
You're looking forward to meeting him?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, as you said, he's won the election with a big margin and proven his popularity. But the Gujarat riots of 2002 are going to haunt him during his tenure. There's no doubt about it. I've been giving interviews on Brazilian newspapers and TV channels since yesterday, and all of them begin this the interviews with. The first question is about Gujarat Rights of 2002 and his role in this and what's happening on that front. So wherever he goes in the world, whether it's in Brazil or US or in Europe, this question will be raised again and again, and there's no escape from him. He has to answer these questions, and in that respect, it's not really very good for India's image as a democratic country, as a secular country, as a multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multicultural country. So it will be a big blow for India's image as a tolerant and a democratic country.
All right.
So yes,
but as a leader of the country, I'm sure, probably we will have to wait and watch and see how things really shape up as far as India's relationships with the United States goes. Thank you, Shobhan. Thank you so much for your comments. Let me now ask Ambassador Fabian for his last comments.
Well, I personally think that while Prime Minister Modi might like to focus on economic matters. I think since he plans to be there for 5 years or 10 years.
Yes.
Well, I suppose it's inevitable that the United States and India will have to engage in a strategic discussion.
Right.
And find out areas where they can cooperate.
Right.
I think it's inevitable.
Right.
And I don't think Prime Minister Modi will find it difficult.
All right.
But his immediate focus might be. And I also think that because in Prime Minister Modi, the United States will find, as I mentioned earlier, an assertive Prime Minister. I think it will be easier for India and the United States to settle matters.
All right. Your last comments, Pramit.
Well, I think that if Modi is able to restore India's economic growth rate to at least 1 or 2% more than what it is right now, and restore the financial health of India, for example, our banking sector and so on, which is on the verge of collapse now. If these are all accomplished within the next 1.5 years, automatically anyway, not just America, but a lot of other countries in the world which are not paying much attention to India right now will start to pay a lot more attention. And as I said, I was personally surprised that Obama called. I hadn't expected him to call until after the oath of office was taken.
Yes.
But that seems to indicate that Obama wants to do something with India.
They want to sit across the table and talk on contentious
But what is
issues.
interesting for me is I haven't really worked out what it is, given that he only has about another year of effective office.
Right.
What exactly he expects to do, since on China and Afghanistan we're not talking.
Yes.
On climate change we are on completely different pages. And on a whole host of other issues with India and the United States are not agreeing. So it's been interesting to see what Obama comes up with and what he hopes to work with Modi.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the shadow of the 2002 riots remain, but because Modi could be assertive, it could be easy for him to negotiate his way as far as Indo-US relationships go. That is the general feeling from this conversation. Thank you so much, Shobhan Saxena. Thank you so much for joining us from Brazil. I would like to thank Ambassador Fabian. I would like to thank Pramit. Thank you so much for joining us in the conversation. The conversation continues on www.indiapostlive.com. Post your audio comments, your video comments, write in to us, and also send us your tweets at #IndiaPostLive and @IndiaPostLive. Thank you so much.